Welcome to the Shared Practices Podcast, Season 6. We get to have a deep in the weeds conversation today, which I'm very excited about. And to welcome back Michael Anderson from the Wondrous Agency. Michael, how are you?
It's good to be back. We're doing good. I've got a lot of family back in the Midwest right now, so I feel bad sitting here in sunny San Diego, walking to work in shorts while everybody else is freezing.
You should feel bad. You should feel awful. It's like 10 degrees over here is the high. So when 10 degrees is the high, that's when you question your life choices. Um, I will say, since our last conversation, first off, my wife listened to our episode. She's been making an effort to listen to the Shared Practices podcast, and I've been very grateful that she did so. And she was impressed and excited, and she was like, "We're working with Wondrous, right?" And I was like, "Oh yeah." On multiple fronts, the Shared Practices website is being rebuilt from scratch by Wondrous, and I just had a meeting with Emma and Mary and Kelsey, and they were awesome. And it's been an amazing process to kind of build this from scratch with them. And then on an undisclosed acquisition that I'm going through right now, I'll be working with you guys on a kind of personal practice level. So very excited about both fronts.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, man. It's been a long time coming. I know you and I have been talking about all this stuff for years and years, so it's super cool to see it all come into fruition.
I went back and I listened at the end of the last episode before this interview to remember, because we had thrown around a bunch of ideas of what we could talk about. And so, of course, me being me, I then came to the beginning of this call and I was like, hey, let's do something a little bit different. Let's talk about everything Google related. So I wanna go in because we talked about, like, you talked about arming our listeners with the tools to better evaluate when someone is going to have someone do SEO for their website, when they're working on their SEO, they're building SEO with Google, Google My Business, and then even Google Ads. I would love to just dive into all of that, as I feel like it's why having a beautiful website that is functional and is doing the right things matters, because it impacts all of these things, and is kind of the default place to start growing a practice online. But I could be wrong. I don't know. Do you disagree with me that Google is a good place to start for people?
I do, and it's so interesting. You know, as a marketing agency, I think there's kind of two sides of the spectrum of the conversations we have, right? We're always we're trying to convince people that stuff that has been around for 10 years matters. Like, we still talk to people and they say, well, do I need a website? Do I need to be on Google? And then on the other side, we have the people that are chasing the next thing. Like, if someone's going to say, like right now, Clubhouse, well, should I be focusing all my efforts on Clubhouse? And so there's the people that are like running way ahead of the crowd. And then there's the people that are behind. And we're always like, let's just set the pace right in the middle. That's where we should be. And so from my perspective, Google is very much alive and well. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. And just to start out with some facts that we know, studies in 2020 showed that about 80% or more of people, I think it's higher, do a search on Google or on a search engine of local businesses before they make a decision to go there. Now, that's not industry specific. So, this includes restaurants and gyms and all sorts of stuff. But what that means is that when people are in their local community, before they say, you know what, I'm just going to go knock on the door to this business, they look you up. And so if for no other reason than to say, listen, I want to make sure that I'm on, and I like to use this term, the digital main street. Like, back in the day, you're walking down small town America, you might have a barbershop on the left side and a barbershop on the right side. Depending on what side of the street you walk down, you go in the door, right? That's how you decide. Well, now people are on their phones. They're in front of their computer. There's a digital main street that you walk down where you search on Google and you get all these options. And the options that are the closest ones to you, if you go back to that old main street, which barbershop's closer, right? There's one that's a block away and one that's a mile away. You're going to go to the one that's a block away. The same thing applies online, and you want to make sure that you're putting your business as close to people as possible. That's the point of good SEO.
Where do we even start? And I will actually say, I think we need to pin a fourth topic into this episode, which would be Google reviews. So SEO, Google My Business, then Google Ads and Google reviews. Maybe we put Google reviews before that. SEO seems kind of nebulous. Like, it's like this magical thing that if you're doing stuff right, that Google rewards you by putting you higher on the list. Um, and a lot of companies come in and say, we can boost your SEO, we can do SEO for you. Um, it seems almost intimidating, and I know it changes too, where back in the day, backlinking was the biggest thing. If you had links from a bunch of authority sources back to your website, then Google was like, oh, this must be a good website, everyone's linking to it. Until people started gaming it. So we almost have to talk about this within a context of 2021, but then there's some underlying principles that are going to stay true no matter what. So I don't know, I'm just making crap up now. Tell me where I'm wrong here.
No, no, it's a great intro. I think the first thing I would say is that SEO often is painted as this sort of black box of mystery, right? And a lot of companies exploit that. In fact, one of the first things you should watch out for is if you're getting emails, which you either are or will get, that are scary emails from companies that say, "Oh my gosh, your website, it's all these things are broken," or we have a report that we want to show you. This is a good tip off that a company is mass sending out lots of scary reports that are going to say there's a problem that you have. Let us, basically the minute you respond, that's when we'll actually start doing some work looking into what's going on. And paint this picture that's kind of scary, like, oh, we're going to pull some levers and push some buttons and SEO is magically going to help your business. That's not at all how it should be. I like relating it back to dentistry. As a non-dentist, if it's your first time in a dental office with a major procedure, that's pretty scary. You're like, well, what the heck's an implant? What's an abutment? What is all this stuff you're talking about? But as a dentist, you're like, wait a second, honestly, gosh, I'm a glorified car mechanic. I'm just working in your mouth here at the end of the day, right? We're putting the spark plug in, we're tightening it up a little bit. Like, again, I'm not trying to oversimplify, but you get the point, right? It's not rocket science. It's something that should be approachable. SEO is the same. So I'd like to try to do that today. There's two areas we should start in. The first one is what we call on-site SEO. This is probably what people are more familiar with. It's the content on your website. And to be specific, so it's what content's on your site. You should have authentic content there. You don't want to have a lot of content that's copy pasted across lots and lots of websites. Why is that? Google at its core is a content machine. If you don't mention dentistry anywhere on your website, Google does not know you're a dentist at its core, right? It needs to have content to know what you are. That's super important. So you want to have authentic content. That's key. You don't want to have duplicate content. But then you get to go in and do all this sort of tweaks and lever pulls. And this is where we become like dentists, right? At the end of the day, good marketers are going to take snapshots of the website and they're going to actually benchmark things. They're going to track results and say, listen, here are the keywords that matter the most. These are keywords that drive a lot of traffic. Best dentist, dentist around me, dental implant. That's something I want to show up for. And then we can actually look and see, well, what pages on your website relate back to these keywords and how are they performing? So let's say that for dental implant, you're not ranking very well. Well, that lets us know we need to go to the specific page that you have on your website about dental implants and reposition content. We need to change things up. Maybe the page performance isn't good. It's not loading quickly. So in brief, here's your punch list. You need to have on-site optimization is good content on your website. It's a website that loads quickly. This should be in at least under 3 seconds. Now, I want to briefly talk about page performance. Page performance, it's not enough to say, we need to just have a page that loads as fast as possible. There's always a consideration for content and speed, right? Performance and speed in this case. What we want to do is say, listen, if you have videos that are really important to show off, that's going to make your site load longer. But those videos are important, so we need to put them there, right? So it's not enough to just say, let's have the fastest site out there. You want to have a site that performs overall. So good content, loads quickly. You want to make sure you're optimizing those title tags and descriptions. That's what Google shows you when you search for something. Your page shows up in Google with a title. Hey, Dr. Lowe's practice, the description, coolest dentist on the planet, right? There's the title and the description there. And those are the most important things that you want to make sure that you're focused on for your on-page optimization.
Can I share a seemingly random example of kind of the same idea? When I input the title for shared practices into Apple Podcasts and created our feed, I made sure that the word there's some like long tail shared practices lines. It's like shared practices, your dental roadmap for the young dentist. Something kind of dumb. If you read the whole title, you're like, you're a little repetitive. But I wanted to show up for dental, dentist, and dentistry in the podcast apps when you're searching for dental podcast or podcast for dentists or dentistry. I wanted to make sure shared practices came up. And so, that's a really dumbed down version of when patients are searching for implant dentist Indianapolis. If you've got a page that's correctly tagged and titled and has content that's original to that has video that is uh, appropriately labeled and titled and aimed at this content, you're going to do better. And then it needs to load well and be efficient. It needs to be not a bloated file and not a bloated site. So those are all. Am I correct in kind of relating that back? Was that an accurate
You
summary?
are, and I think another way to look at this is, and this is what's frustrating a lot of times, because people will say, well, tell me what to do exactly. And if I do all these things, then I'll rank well. It's kind of like me coming into the dentist and saying, tell me what I need to do exactly so that my teeth stay healthy. I never lose one. And you can say, well, there's best practices. And we know if you floss every day, we know if you brush every day, we know if you get sealants, you're going to have a better shot. But there's a bunch of factors at work. You may have thinner enamel than the other person that comes in after you. And I don't control those things. In the world of SEO, there's not a hierarchy of factors. It's a mixture. And so I'll give you one other thing that people don't think about a lot of times with their website. If you're Google, what is Google's job? To provide the most relevant resource, the most relevant result for the person searching. And it has all this information to sift through. Well, if you're looking at a website, what is the first thing that you see oftentimes as a search engine? It's the URL, right? It's going to be wondrousTagency.com. That's the first thing you see. Now, if you're picking a dentist, I'll give you 3 URLs. And everybody listening, you pretend to be Google for a second. You're going to be like Google's hive mind. URL number 1, it's going to be drrichardlowe.com. URL number 2 is going to be Seattle's bestdentist.com. And URL number 3 is going to be smilebright.com. If you're in Seattle, and we're going to pretend for a second that Dr. Lowe is in Seattle too, if you're in Seattle, which one of those URLs would you pick and say, this feels like we're getting somewhere? It's the middle one, right? Because it used Seattle Dentist in the URL. And so there's this hierarchy that you kind of go down from. It's like, okay, well, now we go to the actual website itself. I was talking about content before, but guess what? Some content's more important than others. Look at your website. You have headers, right? The big bold text. That Google knows that. It can see in the code, this is more important. So you want to have your keywords be in important places on the website so that Google can say, okay, Seattle Dentist, URL. Oh, Seattle Dentist appears again in the header. It appears again 5 times throughout the body text. This starts to build a case towards Google saying this is a good resource. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, totally. So having a really off, like there's this naming things is like an existential crisis for me. I care a lot about names. Like a lot of the names we've come up for shared practices or the pursuit of ownership or practice underwater have been like something that I've agonized over. And I see a lot of dentists do the same thing for branding. And sometimes maybe what you're saying is that a stylistic branding choice can be absolutely the right choice for that practice. But there is maybe a cost of, if you were a super boring SEO optimized name for your URL, that might help you, but then you're a super boringly named practice and you have to deal with that on the branding side of things.
You can, but here's the best of both worlds. If you're just starting a practice and you have this decision in front of you, you're listening today, you're like, do I pick a boring name or do I pick a creative one? I say do both. What you want to do is you want to brand your practice in a way that's memorable, in a way that reflects you. So we'll make one up together today, and we're right outside of Liberty Station in San Diego here. So we're going to call this Liberty Dental. It's a cool name. It kind of references the neighborhood, but I really want to rank for San Diego Dentist. And if I if I can, which in this case you probably can't, but if I could buy the URL sandiegodentist.com, what I can do is also buy the URL libertydental.com. And then we get to do this cool thing called a redirect, which means that on your business card, it's going to say Dr. Richard Lowe, libertydental.com. And when someone types that in, there's nothing there. It's a redirect. It's basically like when you move your house, you have a postal redirect. You're like, hey, I don't live here anymore. Send all the mail to this other spot. Same idea. And it goes to good old boring sandiegodentist.com. So that means you can protect your brand and have this great brand that you get to put on everything, but a boring website that's built for SEO. That's one strategy that we frequently use with our clients.
Okay, cool. So the sexy name gets the redirect, and the most optimal SEO name is the one where the website actually lives.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, cool. So are there any tools to tell if your website sucks? Like if your SEO is inherently bad and you're fighting an uphill battle with an existing website, how can you tell? Because I think a lot of people are probably like, I think my website's okay, but I don't know how it does for SEO. Like, is there an objective like way to figure out if your website's any good?
Yeah, so there's
Other
kind
than
of maybe
putting on incognito browser and Googling.
yeah. Yeah, no, there's a bunch of tools out there. There's so many cool ones, but I want to talk about 3 tools today that I think can really help people. And before we do that, there's one test I'd like everybody to do. Well, this is not the end all be all of SEO. If we just dumb it down to elementary grade SEO, and we agree that if you don't mention dentistry on your website, you're not setting yourself up for success. We can all in the school of 101 SEO say, yes, we should have dentistry mentioned on our website. I think we can all agree to that. Go to your website, and if you have a Mac like me, do Command F. That basically lets you search a text block and type in dentist and your city. So for me, dentist San Diego, or maybe more specifically a neighborhood. If you're in New York or LA, like don't do dentist LA, do like dentist Culver City, right? Like that's what you want to do. And see how many times it appears. Now there's no hard and fast rule, but if you find that it doesn't appear at all, gosh, that might be a time to call your SEO company and say, guys, like, should we be mentioning the city and the fact that I'm a dentist somewhere on my homepage? Like, that's important. General rule of thumb, we like to see it mentioned between 5 and 10 times on a website. Now, you don't want to go overboard. You don't get credit for doing it 100 times. Keyword stuffing, you don't get credit for that. But 5 and 10 times is a reasonable amount of time to have at least the word dentist mentioned, and then maybe more specifically the phrase dentist city, maybe between 2 and 5 times, something like that. So,
Cool.
Tools. First one, let's make sure your website has authentic content. There is a cool free tool. All these are going to be free for you guys. And if you go to Google with me, you can type in small SEO tools and then type in plagiarism checker. So small SEO tools, plagiarism checker. And what you can do is you can go to your website.
First suggested completion on small SEO tools. So Google knows that people like this tool.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a popular tool, right? And it gets a lot of use, right? I think probably some professors use it for their classes and stuff. But for you, what you can do is you can go, and I would recommend going to your service pages, dental implant, crown, Invisalign, and take a paragraph and copy paste it on into the box that you see here, and then go ahead and make sure you say like, hey, I'm not a robot. There's that little, captcha there, and then say check plagiarism. And what it's going to do is it's basically going to use Google's own search engine to search for any instances of that copy. And you might be surprised to see how many websites that copy lives on. And, this is not to say that every website that has duplicate content is a terrible site. In fact, at Wonderist, we do have a website option. It's a more affordable one that uses a library of content. That's okay, but it's not our best practice, right? It's like I come in, I say, hey, listen, I want a better smile. You say, well, your best case scenario is an all-on-4 full arch implant. I say, you know what? I think I'm going to go with the denture. It's not the best case, but it still works, right? It's still there. But you should at least know. You should at least know what you have. So check that. That's rule number 1. And our best case scenario is that you have authentic content.
So all these exercises that you're putting us through, like the first one, I'm doing it with a former office that I used to work with. And the first one we failed, there was only actually in the very top title, like the tab title, it did say the city name and dentist, but nowhere else did it say those. And then on the plagiarism check, I've got 100% plagiarism for this one paragraph of content that I checked in the services
Now,
section of the website.
do you see there's a button you can actually click on it and it will show you all of the websites that it's on? Do you see? So if you click on that button there, it's going to not just show you that it's plagiarized, but it's going to show you it. Maybe it's just 2 other websites. Maybe someone's copying you, or it could be 100, right? And so it's good to know not just that the content lives elsewhere, but how big of an offender is this? And so that's a good thing to check.
So in this specific case, it was actually its own website on a different page of the website.
Okay.
So we have that same content in 2 places.
Okay. So that's more forgivable, probably less of an SEO faux pas, and something that could be easily fixed. But yeah, it's important to do that extra check. Cool.
So I have with me today Dr. Matthew Stanrich. We're talking about 3D printing and specifically about the Sprint Ray printer. Why did you choose Sprint Ray and why has it worked out really well for you?
One of the things I really looked for when choosing a printer was a variety of different resins. I didn't want to be locked into one brand and one style of resin. I wanted something that was a little bit more open source, to where if something new came out, there was new developments. I looked for a company that was kind of continually evolving their products and bringing on new resins. Even if it's a third-party resin, they still work with other companies and bringing them into the fold and everything. And the fact that they just build great machines. But really it was the flexibility and the resin profiles and stuff that really kind of drew me to them in the first place.
Okay, so one last question for you. Who is the right purchaser of a Sprint Ray? How do you know if this is going to be worth it for me?
It really comes down to, for the dentist that it's wanting to provide a variety of advanced services. The fact that you can use it for ortho, I use it for my dentures, I use it for my night guards, I use it for my study models, for my digital wax ups. There's just so much that you can do with it, that if you're one of those offices that wants to be kind of a super GP of sorts, or just provide a lot of different services in your practice, then a 3D printer is just a no-brainer at that point.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Matthew Stanrich.
My pleasure.
If you're one of those dentists like Dr. Matthew Stanrich that wants to offer a variety of advanced services in your office via 3D printing, go to sprintray.com/SP to get 2 free bottles of resin bundled into your Sprint Ray printer. That's a huge value offered exclusively for the Shared Practices listeners. Go to sprintray.com/SP.
Test number 2. We want to make sure that the website is built well, right? We want to make sure that it's performing well. And so there's a bunch of tools out there that we can use. I have a personal favorite. And I like this tool because it's kind of like a medical diagnostic tool. Like it lets us, it's like a CT scan. I say it's like a CT scan for a website. So if you want to go to this website, it's called Pingdom, Pingdom, Pingdom. And just go to Google and type in Pingdom speed test. And this is super helpful because it breaks the website down element by element. One important thing to do, you're going to enter your URL, and then you're going to actually pick which area you're going to test it from. So they have different servers around the world. Make sure you pick a server that's close to you. Don't make it be in Europe. If you're in LA, pick San Francisco, right? Something like that. So the test takes a minute to run, but I want to show you what you should focus on. The thing that often happens is you get these tests from companies. They say, bad news, you're getting an F. I really don't like looking at grades. Maybe because I was a bad test taker in school. I don't like looking at grades. I want to know why. What does this mean? So if your website gets a C or a D, don't freak out yet. Let's understand what's going on. The first thing you want to look at, there's going to be these 4 boxes. There's a grade, ignore that. The next one is your page size. Well, this is a flexible number. If you have, again, lots of videos or lots of photo content on your homepage, your page might be bigger, and that might be okay. That's a choice. But generally speaking, we want a page that is between On the low end, 1 MB. So think about photos that you take, right? A 1 MB photo now is a small photo, all the way up to, gosh, I would say 4 or even 5 MB is acceptable. And then after that, with good reason, if we have really impactful video or really like, we can go higher. But 1 to 4 or 5 MB is kind of like a normal range. If your website is 30 MB, 40 MB, 100 MB, something's probably wrong. We should probably look into it. And then the next thing you want to look at is how long does it take to load? Generally speaking, the faster the better. But if we're loading in 2 or 3 seconds or under, that's acceptable, right? And now I want to be clear, there's probably a study out there or another marketer that's like 3 seconds is too long. Well, my response is, what do we want to have on that website? Is that video that we want to show that's a testimonial so important that we're willing to lose a little performance? Sometimes the answer is yes. And then here's where it gets a little bit more complicated. So if you're looking at this, scroll with me, and all the way down, sort of in the middle, you're going to see something that says file requests. And it's almost got these colored bars running, and it's literally showing you how everything's loading. It's giving you the actual time. I wish they defaulted to this, but you actually have to change the way that it's structured. Where it says sort by, instead of load order, go to response body size. We're getting in the weeds here, guys. And
this is great. I love this stuff.
And then uncheck rising. There's a box that you're going to see that says rising. Uncheck that. And now you get to see all the elements on the website by how big they are. And why is this great? I told you this is it's like a CT scan, right? This is how SEO specialists troubleshoot stuff. I'm showing you what we do, and I hope this makes it more approachable. Like, wait a second, this isn't rocket science. I've got 4 images on my website that are all huge. That means someone needs to go in and make them smaller. That's reasonable. This is not a black box of magic. This is like, look, there's weakening in the enamel. We should fix it, right? Like we're doing the same thing. We're doing the same thing, but online. So you should, if you're looking at this saying, well, what's good and what's bad? If you have an image on your website, generally speaking, it should be about 250 kilobytes or smaller. If you see stuff that's like 1 MB, 2 MB, like, oof, that's bad. Let's fix it. Let's make it faster by reducing that size. Does that make sense? So you want to look at each element on your website and look for offenders. What is taking too long on your website to load?
Okay, I love this. So last time I looked at a website of a practice where I used to be. Now I'm looking at a practice that I'm moving towards their existing website. They got an 81. They got a B. Their page size was 1.6 megabytes. Load time 1.1 seconds. Their biggest image on the page was like 350 kilobytes, and the second biggest 320, and then it drops down to like 176 kilobytes. So it seems like this website's, in terms of this Pingdom's like report, doing really well.
Yeah, I would say there's nothing to, so like, and that's where sometimes you might have a client say, why am I getting a B? I was an A student all through dental school. I'm an A student guy, right? This is a website that's probably, built well enough to perform in SEO. There's always little things we can tweak, but there's no problems here. There's no big concerns from what you shared. Cool. Okay. So we've got our Pingdom performance. We talked about looking at plagiarism check. The other tool that I want to share with you guys has a lot more to do with the next thing that we need to talk about. So I'd like to talk about that first, and then we'll get to the tool. So
perfect.
On-site optimization. That is the physical stuff happening on your website. Then there's off-site optimization. That includes your business listing on Google. That includes backlinks, and that includes really anything that can impact your website that isn't on your website. Reviews, all of those things at the end of the day, are signals that Google can look at and say, what do we think about this resource? What do we think about this business? So let's just break that down for a minute, and then I'll give you another tool that you can go check and see how things are going. So
cool.
I think this is the perfect time to talk about Google My Business, and I'd like to include it in this sort of offsite SEO optimization. One of the most important things for you to do is make sure that your Google business listing is set up well. this is a great time for us to acknowledge two different types of SEO. There's general SEO, which we've been talking about, content on the internet. And the rules we just talked about apply to you. They also apply to the Shared Practices podcast. They also apply to the New York Times newspaper. It's Google looking at content. But you're not the New York Times. You're a local business. And local SEO is its own animal. And that's why having your listing be not just claimed, which hopefully everybody has their listing claimed, but built out is so important. So what is your Google business listing? When you search for your practice or your business, you literally see, it's almost like a little card that pops up, and it's got like a photo, your phone number, your hours, reviews. It's like increasingly more and more stuff, right? It's just like, wow, there's all that. Basically, it's like, do I need a website anymore? This thing's right here. You do need a website, but you got to make sure this is built out. That listing is so important. You need the information to be up to date and correct. And think about this. In the last 12 months, how many times has your phone or computer updated? How many times do you pick it up? It says new update waiting. Why is that? What's happening? Technology is getting better. There's new options. There's new things you can do. And Google is no different. I still remember Google back when it was competing with like Dogpile, right? It was like just this like crazy early days, right? It's gotten way better. There's way more stuff you can do. And Google is not humble. They are proud of what they build. They want you to use it. So if they release new features, they expect you to use it. And if you just tuck it away and say, well, I did that when I opened my doors 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and you haven't updated it, do you think Google's going to like you better, or the doctor who is actively saying, oh, new feature for Google, new thing that I can do? So you want to go, I would encourage you guys after listening today, go log into your Google My Business and check out what's there. Here are some things to look at. Make sure that your information about the practice is up to date. And this is a great time for us to pause and talk about a new term, NAP. Now, Dr. Lowe, I'm going to put you on the spot. I think this is something we've talked about before. Do you remember what a NAP is?
I have no clue.
Okay.
So if we did, yeah, then I'm screwed.
That's okay. It's easy to forget. NAP stands for name, address, and phone number. And so this is, in many ways, when it comes to listings, it's kind of your footprint. This is the way that search engines can verify you. Because let's face it, there's a lot of Smiley Dentals out there, right? Well, which Smiley Dental are we talking about today? Well, we can look at their phone number, their address, and of course their name to kind of say, well, which one is this? If you have inconsistencies in your NAP, Google does not like it. And you might say, well, everyone listening, I'm sure right now is like, I don't have inconsistencies. I'll tell you that 80% of the doctors we work with have inconsistencies. You probably do. And it's as simple as having an N for north in your address and then typing north out in another one. Or having the doctor's name for the practice in one listing and then having your practice name in another one. So there's all these variables that they need to be the same, right? You need to make sure that your NAP is the same. So go and look at your information and check all that stuff. Make sure it's consistent and make sure you put anything you can in there, your office hours, your website, build it out, make sure everything's there.
If they've got a field that's appropriate, put something in that field.
Yes, absolutely. The second thing, which is a little bit newer, if you're logged into Google My Business, you're going to notice this thing called posts. And you're going to be like, wait a second, I thought posts were for Facebook and Instagram. Now Google has them. What's going on? And some of you might remember Google Plus, right? That Google tried to kind of make a social media thing happen. And this is maybe a remnant holdover of that. But these are great because it lets you spotlight important things, upcoming events, special offers, new technology. And what it does is it's sending a signal to Google to say, listen, we're current. We're up to date. How many people during this pandemic, which, a lot of us are still in, all of us are still in, I guess, huh? Have wondered, is this restaurant really opened? You go to their website and you're like, they say they're opened, but I don't know. if you can show that you're active, you can say that they posted 2 days ago. I can tell this information is trusted and we're humans. It's more credible. Well, Google's getting smarter than us by the day. It's looking at it the same way. So make sure that you put a post or two in there to keep stuff active and to highlight important stuff.
Is
Review.
are stuff like the 3D tours of your office? Like I know that like on your Google My Business, rather than just having a photo, you can have these like 3D tours, and like Google people come out and do that. Like I've known practices that have done that.
I think it's one of those things where like if you want to be the A+ student, do it. I don't think that's going to be the thing that tips the scale in your favor. Where you're like, if you don't do the 360 tour, and that's the thing about this. Not any one thing that we're talking about is going to make or break your SEO, but the combination of all of them will help. And so, well, that is not the first takeaway from today is to say, oh, I got to do that 360 tour. If you're someone who's an A+ student, you should absolutely have that on your list of things that you want to get to.
Okay.
Here's another big one.
Sorry, and actually, one more question. We'll circle back to the big one, I promise. You talked about other off-site listings. Like I remember, and I don't know if this is outdated information, 2, 3, 5 years ago, people were talking about how your Yelp listing needs to match your Google listing, which needs to match health grades, which needs to match all of these places that NAP those three. Are there any other like major websites that we need to make sure that okay, Google My Business info and these other places are good free places to have accurate information in them?
Yes, there's kind of about 10 core websites on the internet that are big aggregators of information. And so, the thing is, if we look at the names, you're going to all say, I've never heard of them. I've never heard of them. But they exist as databases. And so when companies are trying to build their software, it's way easier for them to pay to get data from the database than it is for them to call Dr. Lowe up and say, hey, Dr. Lowe, we're building a new software. Can we get your personal information? He's like, who are you? I don't want to do that. So if you ever see stuff and you're like, well, I've never heard of them before, they're probably not important. Not necessarily. I'll give you one example. How many of you remember Foursquare? Right? Foursquare used to be a thing. We used to check in at restaurants. We used to get deals. What happened to them? I don't know. But Foursquare, they may not be doing anything with the restaurant game anymore, but they are a huge, big time data aggregator. They have a lot of business information, and that is what they've continued to sell. And so if your business, gets scraped by Foursquare and it's got the wrong data in it, you have a problem now. I promise we'll circle back to this and I'll give you a full list because that is my third tool that I want to share with you guys so you can actually see these listings and you can see if there's a problem. So we will get there. But let's just finish Google My Business real quick so you guys can dive on in and see some of the other stuff that you want to optimize.
And I interrupted you right before you said a big point. So I the cliffhanger, our audience is gonna be mad at me.
No, that's okay. And for anyone that has heard my wife Laura or I talk before, you're not going to be surprised by this big point. You know that we are big fans of authentic photo and video. We believe that if we go back to that digital Main Street, we window shop, right? We look in windows and say, does this look like a good place for me? Do the products look good? Do the people look good? Does the space look inviting? Well, guess what? Your Google Business listing has the ability to have photos. And I would ask you all to stop and think about your own habits for a minute. If you're looking at Google Maps, if you're on Google, if you're looking to pick out a restaurant for a Friday night meal, how often do you click on those images and just tap through 3 of them and say, what does this look like? I do. Well, why are you any different? If you've got a Ceramic mill in your office, you've built out this beautiful space, you've acquired a beautiful space, you've got a friendly team you're proud of, we want to window shop. That's how it is. So go in here and upload some photos, and here's the thing. They don't have to be professional. Don't get hung up on that. If you're sitting there saying, I'm going to remodel I hear this all the time. Oh, I'm going to remodel in 4 months. Oh, we've got an associate that's joining us later this year. We're holding. No, take photos now. You've got someone on your team with an iPhone. Get that content out there and make it an active part of your practice. So upload photos. That's key. And then there's just a few other small things here like services. add the services that you offer. That's going to help Google have another big time signal that's like, gosh, if someone searches for dental implants, you are a solution, right? That's a big thing. So cool. Okay. Those are the big main things that you want to focus on for Google My Business.
Perfect. And I will say, back to the photos thing, I have to bring this up because this happened today. There was a dentist who I reached out to on Facebook. I Facebook friended him because he had made a great post on the making of a dental startup, realized he was in Indiana. And I went to his practice's website, and his practice's website didn't have photos of the doctors or the team members. Like, it just had bios. And it made me like physically angry. Like, I don't know why. Like, that instinct to see people and places that we're interested in is very real and very genuine, and Google knows that and picks up on that.
Yeah, it's I think sometimes we forget that we try to make everything a digital economy, and we're still human beings at the end of the day. And if we don't appeal to those human senses, it all falls apart.
Totally.
Cool.
So were you about to show us this next tool, or where were we
right
going
before
next?
we get there, I want to build this out. We were just talking about your Google business listing, and Dr. Lowe absolutely guided us to the next level, which is that's not it, right? There's these other listings out there. And so I want to make a distinction between listings, which is basically let's call it the yellow pages, right? This is the phone book. This is where you're registered as a business. And then there's backlinks. I hate the term backlink because it's not correct. Backlinks are links on a web page that refer to your website. Why is this important? It's kind of a popularity contest. If Google is looking at all these factors, it's going to say, well, listen, your website looks really good. On-site, that's our new term, on-site optimization. The on-site optimization is good, but what do other people think? Does the local newspaper agree? Do blogs agree? Do some of the industry vendors agree? Do they think you're a good resource too? Do they link back to you? And you want this, but here's why I don't like backlinks. If a marketing agency comes to you and says, we can guarantee you 1,000 backlinks a month. Wow, that sounds pretty impressive. But here's the deal. I can go on one website, one web page, and copy paste a link to your website 1,000 times. So that means that you appear on one web page, on one website, it's 1,000 backlinks. I just created them just like that. So I feel like, the industry made a mistake when it focused on backlinks. What you really want to focus on is referring domains. And right, what is the domain again? That's kind of like the main URL of your website. So for Wonderist Agency, we might have a page that's like wonderistagency.com/about. That's a specific page. Our domain is wonderistagency.com. It's that simple. So what you really want to do is you want to get backlinks on as many domains as you want. How do you do that? You can either work with a marketing agency or start reaching out to your local, the companies you're working to that supply you. Say, hey, we have a partnership. Can you put me on your website? Can you feature me? Reach out to any organizations that you support. If you're donating, say, hey, I'd love to be, featured on your website. I'm donating this. Can my logo for the company be featured there? With a backlink. That's the key thing, right? Is there a backlink? So always look for those opportunities to get backlinks. That's something that dentists miss all the time. They do this charitable giving. They go on, radio station, and then someone writes an article about you. They don't link back to your website. Get the backlink.
Does the authority of the domain that's referring back to your website matter? Like, if like the Indianapolis Star linked back to your website because they wrote an article about you and that they actually put a link in there, that they carry more weight than maybe some random mom and pop shop with like a one-page website that doesn't get much traffic at all.
Yes, and absolutely using the right term here, authority. There's this idea of domain authority, and it's on a scale of 1 to 100. And so, the average dental site is going to be in the between 15 and 30 range. Like that, if you're like brand new, you haven't done anything, you're 15, 20. If you're a little bit more mature, 30, sometimes a 40, that'd be pretty good. But if you have websites that are linking back to you that have a higher domain authority, that link has more value. Sometimes you hear it called link juice, right? Like how much link juice does it have? Now, keep in mind, none of this stuff is officially decreed by Google. Google only suggests. It says, well, this is important to us, but other people have had to come in and create vocabulary to help us understand. But if you can get a link from the New York Times, hopefully not for killing a lion, then yeah, it's going to help you out. But yeah, it's the higher the domain authority, the better the link.
Okay, cool.
Cool. So I know I promised you guys another tool. And here's another one that we really love. There's a bunch of these out here, but I think this is a good one. There's a company called Moz, M-O-Z. And if you go into your Google search bar, you can search for Moz, M-O-Z, Backlink Explorer. And this will help you see what backlinks you have to your website. So if you're like, I want to know like how many backlinks are out there, this will tell you. And so you can start to see who's linking back to me. I'm not going to spend as much time on that, but I want you guys to know that here's the one that you really need to do. Go to Google again and search for Moz listing management. That's going to let you search for, I might have given you the wrong term. Let's see, Moz, it might be Moz local listing. Moz local listing. And it's going to be check your local. Yeah. So Moz local listing score, check your citation. So you want to search for Moz local listing score. And then you're going to be able to use that tool to put in your company name, your street address, and your zip code. And so this is going to go back and help you understand how you're doing on that NAP, the NAP, right? Is everything looking good? And honestly, you're going to probably see a score you're not happy with. Like that, it happens all the time. What you want to do is you want to make sure that this is a conversation you're having with your marketing agency. You're saying, hey, what can we do to make this better? Sometimes they're actively working on it. There are a lot of listings out there with no human beings on the other side. And so you constantly have to push requests and say, hey, can we get this data updated? And it takes forever. It's thankless work. But you need to make sure there's a strategy in place to make sure that the name, the address, and the phone number are all consistent. So this is the 101 of SEO. You got to have this right before you do anything else.
So the website I just plugged in had a 44% missing, so a big like red slice of the pie, 48% incorrect, and 8% correct.
Right. And so there's work to be done. And now this is where I want to temper all this with some reality. A lot of marketers can use this stuff to scare you and say your current company sucks and you should come over here. That's not always the way you should read this, right? It's more important that you understand the problem and that the company you're working with says, here's what we're actively doing. If you bring this to them and it's news to them, they're like, oh yeah, listings. Well, I guess we could work on that. That's a bad sign. But if you bring it to them and they're like, I know we've fixed these kind of core ones, but we're working on the more stubborn ones, give them the time to do that. Don't just go off the score. I think that's one of the things I dislike the most about some marketers is that they'll use reports like this to scare you into saying, oh my gosh, everything's terrible. Maybe not the case. Just build a good treatment plan around what you see.
Is it fair enough to be asking like, okay, you're working on SEO. If you're hiring someone to do SEO, what aspect of SEO are you guys working on this month or next?
Yes, and different companies have different philosophies. Wonderist, we are a on-site content-focused company. So we add new content to your website every month. It could be a blog, it could be a service page, or, and this is really how SEO works, if we track a bunch of keywords over time and then we see that we're not performing as well for Invisalign, that means we need to go back to the page that's ranking for Invisalign and make changes. We should not just blindly be forging ahead with new content. We should go back and make revisions to try to optimize. That's what that means, to try to optimize those pages for better performance. So you should ask companies, what is your philosophy? Are you more of an on-site content first company? Are you more of a backlink focused company? Do you do it all? What works best for me? And, you can see success with both. Obviously, our philosophy is more let the content do the talking, and then in aggressive markets, supplement with backlinks. I think only in really hyper aggressive markets do you need a really robust backlink campaign. If you're not in a major metro area or a really dense dental population, content rules the day.
Okay, cool. This I asked at the beginning of this call, I was like, Michael, let's do a deep dive on Google. Let's give people tools to make them dangerous and feel like they know something. Because ultimately, so much of the problem of practice ownership is that people just like don't even have a framework to fit their problems within. And I think that's what I wanted out of this conversation was a framework to be able to think about and talk about SEO with companies that they are potentially hiring, the ability to evaluate their own website. Maybe the dentist still can't optimize every little teeny aspect of this for themselves, and that's why people exist like you and Wondrous that can help people do that. But at least now they can have an intelligent conversation and evaluate whether they need help on these different aspects of their website.
100%.
So I guess one plug here, and this will go back to like a little debate that you and I had about a year and a half ago. Maybe it's 2 years ago. When we first met, we were talking about I think it was Chicago Midwinter 2019. We were talking about Google reviews, and I was really big on Swell. Swell is a partner of Shared Practices. Full disclosure, we're going to talk about Swell and why I like them. There are other companies that do great things for reviews. However, we've found that Swell is the right combination of getting real results and affordability and continually developing and making this better. That is another, for us, that's like the low-hanging fruit of when someone acquires a practice, we ask, are you getting reviews? Do you have Swell plugged in? Because over time, that's going to increase their authority. It's going to increase their SEO. Is that correct to assume that the number and the freshness of reviews affects your SEO?
Yes, I think it's 100% one of the more effective SEO tactics that dentists can be responsible for. Because a lot of times, we'll get the question, well, what can I do? And, well, you can learn how to build a website. You can start writing content like crazy. You can, get on your website and optimize every keyword and page load and all that. Most of the time, dentists say, I'm not interested in that. I'd like someone else to do that. But reviews are something that you as the dentist need to own. Your team needs to own. And, Dr. Lowe, I should have learned this a while ago. You are, as always, right about the things that you share with me. Swell is now a partner of Wondrous as well. We love what that team is doing. I think they've really, there are a lot of good companies out there, but Swell has really hit that middle of affordability and performance. And, as an official Google partner, one of just a few companies out there that are, they really do have an edge when it comes to helping with review generation. This is a no-brainer. I'm always just baffled when dentists are like, gosh, should I do this? It's like, I don't know what it is. Like, it's a couple $100 a month, $200 a month, something like that. It's pretty affordable. And, I'll just briefly share, and I know we've talked about this before, there's a magic formula. It's a magic formula. If you just get Swell, you're going to get more reviews. That's great. You can just put it on autopilot. You're going to get more reviews. But what you need to do is you need to meet with your team and you need to set a goal and say, hey, here's, we see 500 patients in this period of time. And, my metric is always, I think you should be able to get 5% of those people to leave review. That might seem like a really low number. Beat it, right? Great. Make it 20. I don't care. 5% should leave a review. And here's what you do when they're checking out, when you're getting ready to swipe their card, you're saying goodbye, you're scheduling them, say, hey, how was your experience today? And most of the time people say, great. Gosh, I love my hygienist. Gosh, I love Dr. Lowe. It was great. At which point you say, well, that's great to hear. It means a lot to us. In fact, you're going to be getting a text message later today that's going to ask you to leave a review. Now, I know you're busy and I know you have better things to do, but I want you to know that we read those. And that's another key phrase. I want you to know that we read those. They're important to us. And if you would take a minute of your time just to give us that same feedback, I know Dr. Lowe would love to read that. And just by having that verbal exchange, you see the accountability go way up. And so if you can consistently generate reviews, it's a big deal. And one other question we get is, well, I've already got 500. Is that good enough? Google wants consistency. right? They want to know that you're active, that it's better to get 5 a month than to get 100 in 1 month and to stop. You need to make it a consistent habit.
Perfect. I love that. You said, let me see if I can repeat this back. I want you to know that we read those reviews. Did I say it right?
Well, first of all, you want to set them up with how was your experience? And if they say bad, cool, you get to intercept that, say, oh my gosh, what can we do? But if they say good,
right.
Well, how can they, what's the barrier to them leaving a review now? They've already told you that it's good. They've already given you the first good review, at which point you let them know that it matters. We care. This is not, you're not just saying this to a computer anymore, right? It's not just a text. I'm waiting for you to tell us what your experience was. It creates accountability. That's the key thing.
Totally. I love that. And I think you're really getting the most out of your experience with Swell, with a company that's going to do that for you. We're running out of time. I have to go pick up something in about 20 minutes here. We didn't even get to Google Ads, which is a whole beast in and of itself. Google ad campaigns and paid advertisements. We there's so much to get to, which is great. Like I only have you for so often. This was exactly what I wanted. I really wanted a deep dive on SEO, Google My Business, Google reviews. Are you willing to come back for a Google Ads and another episode on this?
Gosh, if there's still people listening to me after this, I'm happy to keep talking. But yeah, no, there's so much to talk about when it comes to paid search. And honestly, I almost think breaking them into two separate categories makes sense in a lot of ways. There's our organic discovery, and then there's our paid direct marketing that is often a very important technique for a lot of our practices as well.
And so maybe we can kind of lump, we've done organic Google, there's the organic social media, then there's also the paid Google and paid social media. So there's a lot of topics that we could talk about. Maybe it's 2, maybe it's 1 episode. As often as I can get you on here, I'm going to. But what would you, if you could rank those paid social versus paid Google, where do you typically start with? In terms of we should be doing this first and then we should move on to this next, or does it based on region?
If it's paid, I would say overwhelmingly you're going to see probably a better response from Google, but it's more expensive and it's a bigger jump, right? I know a lot of people look at that and they're like, oh, like I don't know if I'm ready for that. And I guess my thought is social is really powerful, but I think that if you don't have a good organic approach to social, it gets a lot harder to do a good job with paid. And in a nutshell, you need to have authentic content. Like if you just expect to pay a marketing agency, they're going to whip up a bunch of ads with stock images and they're going to snap their fingers and you're going to, be just piles of patients are going to be showing up at your door. You're going to be disappointed every time. You need to be a participant in social media marketing, whether it's paid or whether it's organic. And so, that's my cautionary tale, because there's a lot of people out there that say, you get on the Facebook forums, oh, I spent $50 and that's how I launched my scratch practice or my acquisition, right? Like $50. And I'm not saying that that's wrong, but the content was the reason that it did well, not the budget. Google Ads, the key distinction is you're speaking to people that are looking for you in that exact moment. I have an emergency. I'm looking for an implant. I'm interested in Invisalign. You get to intercept them and say, hey, I'm here to help. Whereas with social media, it's more passive. You're talking to people at a point that they may not be ready. And so there's different strategies there. Absolutely something we can dive into a little bit more in a future episode.
Cool. Well, once again, thank you for coming on the show. This has been fantastic. I've really enjoyed the deep dive here and everything you brought to the table. So if someone is interested in working with you guys, with Wonderist, what's the easiest way for them to reach out to you guys?
Yeah, first of all, I'd encourage you guys to, put us to the test a little bit. Go on our website, see if we're eating our own dog food. Check us out, wonderistagency.com. Look at us on Google. Look at our Google business listing we talked about today. Read our reviews. And then if you want to reach out to me personally, my personal email is michael.anderson@wonderistagency.com. And you can always go on our website and schedule time with our wonderful team to ask questions and get a proposal so you can understand what it looks like to work with us.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. Well, cool. This has been another episode of the Shared Practices podcast. We'll talk with you next time. See you, Michael.
Bye.